For 3 full days, the three women who were sleeping with Grace's husband ended up inside her house. They were bathing him, feeding him, cleaning his urine, and even wiping his poop from his body. The same man they were fighting over, the same man who had lied to all of them, the same man who had betrayed Grace for nearly 30 years of marriage. And the reason they were doing all this will shock you. Stay tuned, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the story. It started 27 years ago, the day Grace married Daniel, the love of her life, so she thought. Grace met Daniel when she was 23 years old. Back then, he was the kind of man every woman noticed. He was tall, confident, handsome, in those effortless ways that made people turn their heads when he walked past. But what really attracted Grace to him wasn't his looks, it was his personality. Daniel had this way of making people feel comfortable. He could walk into a room full of strangers and within 10 minutes, everyone would be laughing at something he said. Grace's friend used to tease her and said, Grace, that your man is dangerous. Oh." She would laugh and say, dangerous as how, smiling shyly. One of her closest friends, Mariam, once said something Grace would never forget. Men who charm everyone usually hide something. Are you sure this is really what you want? Because handsome men do behave as if nuts in their head is malfunctioning. At the time, Grace thought she was just being dramatic because Daniel treated her like a queen in his kingdom. He brought her bouquets of flowers. He called her every single night. He would drive across town just to see her for 15 minutes. In fact, there was a time he told her he could borrow wings from flying witches at night just to come and see her. When he proposed 2 years later, Grace didn't hesitate. She said yes immediately, like a confused goat eating paper posters on the wall. She thought she was marrying the love of her life. The early years of their marriage were good, really good. Everything was rosy. They would always call each other sweet names like my king, and Daniel would reply by calling her the only queen in his kingdom. They were not rich, but they were comfortable. Daniel worked as a sales manager for a distribution company, and Grace helped run a small grocery shop her mom had helped her start up. They worked hard, slowly building their lives together. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Their house was small but warm, and during those early years, Daniel was still the man Grace fell in love with, attentive, playful, and supportive. If someone had told Grace then that this same man would one day become the source of her greatest pain, her worst enemy, she would have laughed in their face and called them haters. The first crack in the marriage appeared around their 10th anniversary. Daniel started coming home later than usual. At first, Grace didn't question it, but gradually the excuses started sounding familiar. Traffic was terrible. I had to wait on the road for 30 minutes, so it was that bad though. In fact, the line started from here down to another state, he would lie. One night, Daniel was in the shower. His phone was on the bed beside Grace, and suddenly it buzzed. Messages came in 3 times immediately. She ignored it at first, but then the screen lit up again and she saw the message. Baby, are you still coming tonight? I'm waiting. Oh. Remember that massage I gave you the last time you were here? This one will be better than that one. Just come over. Her heart dropped. Grace opened the message, and what she saw made her stomach twist. The conversation between Daniel and that woman was intimate, flirty, too comfortable for just casual friends. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, Grace was still sitting there with the phone in her hands. He saw the look on her face immediately and he knew he was in trouble. Grace turned to Daniel with anger in her eyes and asked, "So, I am not enough for you now? You now follow all these little girls that can't even properly wash their pants. Daniel," she said, staring at him. That night, all the begging in Daniel's mouth finished as he pleaded. He cried like a baby. He said it was a mistake. "See, I promise you, it won't happen again. It was the devil's handwork. Oh. If I see any woman coming towards my direction from the right, I would take my left and run away. He promised it would never happen again." And because Grace loved him so much, because they had children together, because she didn't want to destroy their family, she forgave him and warned him strictly never to try it again. Looking back now, that was the moment everything changed, because once someone realizes they can betray you and still keep you, something shifts inside them. The cheating didn't stop. Daniel just became more extremely careful, more hidden, more calculated. Over the next several years in their marriage, Grace discovered more women. Each time she confronted him, he had a different explanation. "Why are you even touching my phone? This person is just a colleague." "We are becoming paranoid," he would angrily reply, collecting his phone forcefully from Grace. Eventually, Grace stopped confronting him, not because she didn't know the truth, but because she was tired. Tired of arguing, tired of crying, tired of hearing lies over and over again. Instead, she focused on her children. She focused on growing her shop. She focused on surviving, not focusing on her stupid husband that might end up giving her high BP one day. But deep inside her, something was slowly dying. The love she once had for Daniel began to fade, and in its place grew something else, something colder, something quieter, and it was resentment. About 6 years ago, Grace accidentally discovered something shocking. Daniel didn't just have one woman on the side or two, he had three. Three different women, three separate relationships. And the most unbelievable part, each of the side chicks believed she was the only one Daniel was dating. One of them thought Daniel was separated from his wife. Another one thought he was in the process of divorcing Grace. The third one believed that he was a lonely businessman whose wife didn't understand him and always gives him headache. Grace remembers sitting in her shop that day, just staring into space, thinking about the man she had spent most of her adult life with and asking herself one question: who exactly did I marry? How is it that a man in his 50s is senseless, following little girls around? But even after discovering the truth, Grace still didn't walk away, because life is complicated. Their finances were tied together. Their assets were shared. Living was not as simple as packing a bag. So she stayed, but emotionally, she had already checked out of the marriage long ago. Until 3 weeks ago, the day Daniel collapsed on their living room floor and became stiff. Grace stared at Daniel's convulsing body, thinking if she should take him to the hospital or rather just let him die so she could have peace of mind. After some minutes, she had pity on him and took him to the hospital. The doctors told her that her husband had suffered a stroke, and that day, she discovered that his three side chicks were still texting him, completely unaware that the man they were fighting over could no longer even walk, talk more of pressing his phone. When Grace saw those messages pop up on his phone, she had to hold the phone close to Daniel's face just to unlock it, because he had no access to his password. She discovered the greatest shock of her life. Something inside her shifted. Not anger, not even sadness, it was clarity. For almost 30 years, She had carried the weight of his choices. And now, those same women were sending messages like, "Baby, where are you? Why are you ignoring my messages? I miss you so much. Please call me." They had no idea that the man they were texting could barely lift his arm, talk more of his fingers to type back. And that's when an idea came to Grace. But before she acted on it, she knew she had to be very, very careful. So she made two phone calls. The first was to her lawyer, Mr. Deyemi. She told him everything: the stroke, the three women, the messages, and her idea. There was silence for about 10 seconds from the other end of the phone. Then Mr. Deyemi answered and asked, "Are you planning to force them to do anything?" "No," Grace replied immediately. "They will come voluntarily," she answered. He sighed. "Well, technically speaking, if they come willingly and you simply ask them to help care for him, there is nothing illegal about that." Then he added, "Just make sure there is a witness around in case things get emotional." The second call was to Officer Bayo, a police officer Grace knew through church. When she explained the situation, he laughed so loudly she had to move the phone from her ear. Then he said, "I'll come around when they arrive. Not to arrest anybody, oh, just to make sure everything stays peaceful." That was exactly what Grace wanted. The first woman to text again was Anita, her husband's side chick. Young, flashy, always posting pictures in expensive clothes. Her message came late that night. "Baby, why are you ignoring me? Did your wife suspect something?" Grace typed slowly, posing as Daniel. "My wife traveled yesterday. The house is empty. Can you come tomorrow evening?" Three dots appeared immediately, showing that Anita is typing back. "Really? I'm coming," she replied with full excitement. Grace placed the phone down and shook her head. "One down, two more to go," she said to herself. The next morning came a message from Laila. "She's more mature, more calculating." Grace replied as Daniel. "My wife traveled. Come tomorrow morning." Laila responded with a heart emoji and said finally. Grace almost laughed. The third woman was the most interesting one among the three. Her name was Tessa, and she was a registered nurse. Her message read, "Baby, I just finished my night shift. Are you free later?" Grace then typed as her husband again, "Come to my house on Sunday. I'll be alone." Tessa replied, "I'll bring something very special for you." Grace stared at the screen and said, "Oh, she's even coming with something special. No problem." Friday evening came quickly. Grace had already brought Daniel home from the hospital. He sat in a wheelchair in the living room, weak, confused, part of his body still not responding properly. She didn't tell him what she was planning. At exactly 7:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. There was Anita, smiling, holding a little weekend bag. Dressed in a tight red dress and the high heels, her perfume strong enough to fill the entire hallway and neighborhood. "Baby, where are—" She stopped, her eyeballs almost popping out from her eye sockets. Then she saw Grace. Her smile froze. She looked from Grace to Daniel, who was sitting on a wheelchair looking helpless, drool forming at the corner of his mouth. Her entire body stiffened. Who are you?" she stammered. Grace folded her arms calmly and replied, "I'm his wife." Before Anita could run, Officer Bayo stepped into the room. "Madam, relax. No one is in trouble." Grace looked at Anita and said the words she had been waiting years to say. "You love my husband, right? Good. Because from today, You will take care of the man you claim to love. You will bathe him, clothe him, feed him, and clean up his poop because he is now paralyzed. This is kidnapping, Anita said angrily. I'm calling the police. Grace laughed until tears dripped from her eyes. You came here willingly, you little side chicken, and there is no need to call the police. One is already in our midst, she said, pointing at Officer Bayo. With no way out, Anita succumbed, and she started cleaning Grace's husband. Lila arrived on Saturday morning, walking in confidently, as if she owned the house, clearly expecting romance from Daniel. But the moment she saw Anita wearing cleaning gloves and holding a washing bucket, her face twisted in confusion. Then she saw Daniel in the wheelchair. She slowly turned towards Grace and whispered one word. Are you his wife? Grace nodded. Yes, I am. The realization hit Lila like a brick. She tried to fight back, but Officer Bayo intervened. By Sunday afternoon, the house was already tense. Then, the doorbell rang again. Tessa arrived with a confident smile, wearing a very skimpy skirt, chewing gum like a lost goat. But the moment she stepped inside and saw the scene, everything clicked. She looked at Daniel, then at Grace, then at Anita and Lila, moving tiredly around the room cleaning. Then she sighed. You planned all this, didn't you? Grace smiled. Yes, of course I did, she replied. Once all three of them were in the living room, Grace explained calmly. For years, you all shared my husband. Now he has stroke. So, from today, you will share the responsibility of a wife with me too. Tessa replied quietly and said, You can't force us, madam. I'm not forcing you, Grace replied. We are free to leave. Just remember, your messages and the nude pictures you've been sending to a married man are still on his phone. Bloggers will be very happy to have a new hot topic to post. So you better respect yourself and shut that thing you call mouth. Side chickens, side kukuruku. That's what you all are. That was enough to threaten them, and not even one of them moved an inch. The fantasy they had about Daniel disappeared quickly because the reality of caring for a stroke patient is not romantic at all. They helped lift his body, they cleaned him up, they wiped the drool from his mouth, they spoon fed him soft food, and even bathed him. And every time they complained, Grace will reply and say, I have been taking care of him alone for days now. Now it's your turn. She sat in the living room sipping juice and watching TV. By the third day, they looked exhausted, emotionally broken, and strangely humbled. Anita began crying quietly, claiming she didn't know Daniel was still married to Grace. Madam, I don't know your husband was still married to you, but he told me that you guys are divorced. Grace looked at her calmly. But you knew he was someone else, right? You knew he belonged to somebody, right? Anita had no answer and kept quiet. On the fourth morning, Grace finally had pity on them. She let them go. No shouting, no arguments, just silence. They walked out one by one, heads bowed in shame. And since that day, none of them has ever contacted Daniel again. Weeks passed, and slowly, very slowly, Daniel began to recover. First, it was small things, the grip returning to his fingers. Then, words finding their way back to his mouth as he began to speak slowly. The doctors were carefully taking care of him, but something else was recovering too. Daniel's conscience. Because as Daniel laid in that bed day after day, he had nothing but time to think, time to remember every lie, every excuse, every woman, Every night he had come home late and looked Grace in the eye, lied and felt nothing. He remembered watching his side chicks, the same women he had wined and dined with, the same women he had whispered sweet promises to. They were all struggling to clean him up, complaining under their breaths, counting the minutes until they finally left his house. He thought about how none of them had cried for him. Not one of them had looked at him with anything other than shock, inconvenience, and disgust. And then he thought of Grace, his loving wife. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the stroke, Daniel called her into the room. His speech was still slow. His words still took effort. But he looked at her, really looked deep into her eyes for the first time in years. Grace, Grace, I'm sorry. She stood by the door and said nothing. I know sorry is not enough, he continued, shedding crocodile tears, his voice cracking. But I need you to know, I finally understand. Those women were never real. What they wanted was never me. It was my money they wanted. But you stayed by my side through everything. Even after what I put you through, you still brought me home. Oh, please, will you shut your mouth? Grace interrupted him. So now you know it was your money they wanted, eh? He looked down at his trembling hands. A side chick will never be there for you when it truly matters. They come for the good times, the dinners, the gifts, the excitement. But the moment life gets hard, they disappear. Or worse, they have to be threatened just to show up. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. You were the only real thing I had, the only one I loved, and I wasted it. I wasted you. I wasted us. Please, please, my queen, please forgive me, he said, crying. Grace stood there for a long time. She didn't cry. She had cried all her tears years ago. But something in her, that cold, quiet wall she had built around her heart over 27 years shifted just slightly. Not enough to forget, not enough to pretend the past had not happened, but enough to say one thing. I hear you, Daniel. And she walked out of the room quietly without saying another word. Whether she would ever truly forgive him was a question she hadn't fully answered yet. Maybe she never would. Maybe one day she might. But for the first time in 27 years, Grace was no longer the only one carrying the weight of what her marriage had cost her. Daniel was carrying it too. And somehow, that was enough. We've come to the end of this amazing story. Thank you so much for watching to the end. So, do you think Grace did the right thing by dealing with her husband's side chicks and inviting them to clean him up? Or do you think she went too far? Please drop your thoughts in the comment section. Please and please remember to like the video. If you haven't also subscribed to my channel, please remember to subscribe. I'll see you in my next story. Bye.